I'm Father Robert Balliser, host of This Week in Enterprise Tech on the Twit TV network, here for No Jitter at Enterprise Connect 2015. I am sitting next to Boris Selitser from Oracle, who's going to tell us a little bit about what makes their business unit so interesting. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Hi.
Why is the Oracle business unit so unique?
Well, what makes it unique in the market, the fact is that we're like a business within a business. You know, we are laser focused on communications, but at the same time we're able to leverage the larger Oracle for all the footprint and all the IT and web expertise that it brings. Now, you know, the industry is undergoing a transformation right now, so a lot of the web and IT principles and technologies are starting to encroach on communications. And Oracle traditionally has a large footprint and strength in that regard, and so we're able to leverage that right now. But also, if you look at it, you know, we're going from a closed box kind of a approach to solutions to more of a transparent stack where all the components are clear and identifiable. You know, standard operating system, standard virtualization, pure software, standard telecom application servers and the like, which you would think is the norm. But in the industry, in communications, that isn't the case. We're slowly trying to get there. So I think Oracle has played a strong role in that regard in IT and web technologies for quite a while, but now in communications, we're able to do that with a focused effort in terms of communication business unit. And you know, as the communications business unit part of Oracle, we have the luxury of leveraging the rest of the technology and application portfolio. So we can pick and choose the right things and how to apply them to the business, right, of communications, and also be able to share. So, you know, a lot of the IT personnel, you know, right now can't deal with telephony, can't deal with communications. You got to have a specialized skill set, you got to have a specialized talent for that. And that's strange because new things like mobility are coming into play and people just don't know, don't have dedicated people within IT to look at that. Now, if you take the same, you know, stack, you take the same operational principles that already exist in IT and you start to share things across the stack, it makes a lot of sense. So the same people who take care of your IT and leverage the kind of the cycle, the innovation cycle that you've seen on the web and IT side, where the communications hasn't really kept pace until recently. That's where I think sharing the components across the stack makes a lot of sense, and that's kind of the core approach we have within the communications business unit.
Speaking of those individual components, one of the ones that has garnered a lot of buzz over the last few years is WebRTC. I understand WebRTC is an important part of Oracle's strategy.
That's true. I mean, we have quite a bit going on at the show today, but I'll tell you, WebRTC is obviously, you know, and I'm not the first one to say it by far, has a huge disruptive, you know, potential within the industry. And a lot of, as a technology, right, a lot of people are taking advantage of it. But you could look at WebRTC from two angles, right? One is taking the existing kind of unified communications and contact center infrastructure and expanding that to the web, opening that to the web via WebRTC, right? That's one approach. And a lot of the traditional vendors within the unified communications and contact center space tend to look at it that way. The other approach, the other side of the spectrum, is actually taking the existing business applications, existing web applications or mobile applications we use to conduct business day to day, and adding communications features to those, right? That's the alternative approach, and I think that's the type of approach I think where Oracle is playing a strong role, and Oracle Communications in particular is playing a strong role, and where we can, you know, actually make a difference, and what we're doing already with our existing kind of on-premise and cloud-based applications. So I think, you know, having the application expertise, knowing what the business process, etc., looks like within those applications, and actually expanding those with communication features. And already, you know, a lot of familiarity, as I mentioned before, with those types of tool sets and that type of, you know, environment.
Let's talk a little bit about that second way, that second approach of building in those applications with WebRT Smarts. Do you have any examples of your customers actually doing that and you helping them deploy that solution?
Right, so definitely. So I'll give you some examples and then I'll talk about, you know, all the different things, I guess, around WebRTC or some of the emerging use cases we're seeing. So for example, we're seeing people do things with self-service, you know, web self-service, and expanding that with real-time or web-based real-time channels, right? So a lot of the companies are thinking, okay, well, I got my telephony kind of channel or my voice channel for customer service and other things. And then I got my web experience, and a lot of them starting to migrate to the web experience. In many cases, those two are completely different within the business in terms of who's handling it, who owns that, and the operational aspects, the people staffing those things are very distinct, and that's a problem, obviously. But also, so we're seeing people look at self-service, web self-service, because a lot of people start, obviously, their interaction with the business on the web, right? And self-service is an effective, from a company standpoint, way to address their needs, and also from a customer standpoint, a lot of the questions can be answered quicker when you start out, on the web and you continue to kind of get your issues resolved on the web. But, their needs to obviously, people get frustrated to pick up the phone when they can't get their answer on the web. Now we're looking at essentially a number of use cases from our customers where it's an escalation path out of self-service. So more proactive engagement when we can track the customer behavior and say, hey, this customer is actually not, has been staring at this particular page for too long, or is the navigation patterns is indicative of the fact that the customer is not getting their issue resolved. We can engage them with a proactive either chat or voice or video interaction. And so then it's an escalation path out of self-service, and your issue gets resolved right there and then. So you have the context, and the customer isn't frustrated. They can go back to self-service the next time an issue comes up, rather than giving up, going to an alternative channel where a lot of the context is lost, and you end up repeating yourself to the to the company that's servicing you.
That example really shows off the whole idea of your business unit being a sort of a skunk works within Oracle. The ability to focus on UC and yet utilize the experience of the entire organization. But that was more of a generic example. That was WebRTC in a generic business app. Do you have some specific, unique applications that use that technology?
Yeah, so, I mean, just by the way, I want to comment on the skunkworks analogy. I think the business is very substantial. I mean, if it was split out from Oracle, it'd be, one of the larger telecom kind of companies in its own right. So, I took a sensitivity to that comment. But to your question, there's additional use cases that we see emerging, right? There's the immediate opportunity, which is kind of, as I spoke about, expanding the existing infrastructure with new modes of access. So for example, remote agent for contact center example. We have a customer out in Europe who has, a large 15,000, tele-sales force, okay, that are essentially reusing their existing contact center infrastructure for, in terms of how customers getting into that, and in terms of how the routing and et cetera, decisioning within that infrastructure is taking place. But what they're doing is they're enabling the agents to be accessible via WebRTC endpoints, and the setup and the installation of the endpoint is much easier, and the experience is a much more high fidelity experience. So there are a lot of people that are accessing it from wherever they happen to be, and the agents are able to kind of utilize and get set up very quickly and get going, and it's kind of an adjacency to an existing kind of deployment they already have. Now another example is another kind of managed service provider out in Europe that is doing kind of audio and video conferencing, and they're expanding access to either guests or casual users into the conferencing service. And so they're using utilizing WebRTC for that. It could be over mobile, it could be over desktop type client, but instead of you having to be provisioned and the overhead of doing that, it's removing a lot of the friction for people to kind of casual users or one-time users using that bridge, using that conferencing service to be able to be plugged in and collaborate in that fashion. So that's kind of the emerging, the first wave of the use cases we're seeing. The next wave is some of the self-service escalation paths that I talked about, but also advanced customer experience, where we see a large e-commerce site apply this. So what they're doing is essentially deploying kind of live video and collaboration and screen sharing with the customer. So for that elite tier of customers that they chose, the value of those customers is high to that business, and they're able to provide this more advanced customer experience to them. So that's another use case. We're seeing adoption across specialized solutions. For example, services for hearing impaired, interpretive services for hearing impaired, where you could see the technology being, being a conduit, removing a lot of the friction, removing the specialized devices that the consumer might use, and removing some of the friction in that regard. Yeah.
That's fantastically diverse use cases. Pretty much encompasses every possible usage of UC that I can think of. Boris, thank you very much for talking to us. Now, of course, people need to stop by your booth. They need to go and speak to your representatives. They need to find out what you can do for their deployments. If they were to be at Enterprise Connect, where could they go to find Oracle?
So, we have the booth at the expo, on the expo grounds, of course. There's a number of demos going on there. So, there's, signs clearly identifying where Oracle is. There's a number of sessions that Oracle is running during the conference. So certainly, please stop by and hope to, see more of you and interact with you.
And for those folks who can't make it out to Orlando, where can they go online to find out more information about what you could do for them?
I mean, the easiest place is always oracle.com/communications. That's kind of the landing page starting point. So, you could go there and find out more.
Boris, thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for the resources that you bring to Enterprise Connect. Speaking of Enterprise Connect, we're going to give you more after this. I'm Father Robert Palliser. Stay tapped.